Administration comments in the immediate aftermath of the confrontation when senior officials described the 37-year-old as a direct threat to federal officers. Joining us now is Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He's the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee and will be the chairman of that committee if Democrats win the House in November. Congressman Raskin, I want to get right to this new reporting of what's been transmitted to Congress. And I'm just wondering about, it makes me first of all wonder, what would be the legal implications of Kristi Noem trying to continue her lie in a report like this to Congress? If she were to say to Congress he was brandishing a weapon, he was a domestic terrorist, why would she be reluctant to do that in a direct communication with Congress?
Well, she might not want to be impeached for it, to start off with it. She might not want a bipartisan condemnation for lying to Congress, and she might not want to be prosecuted herself, depending on the exact circumstances and context within which she serves up a lie. But look, they've been lying from the beginning about both of these cases, calling Renee Good, calling Alex Preddy domestic terrorists, claiming that the ICE officers were acting in self-defense, which they most assuredly were not. These were cold-blooded killings and likely murders by the agents that undertook to kill defenseless people. And, this is a massive assault on civil liberties. Of course, these are people who are just exercising their First Amendment rights to petition in public, to freely, peacefully assemble in public, to speak and to record, because the people are the press too. And everybody who has a cell phone has the right to use that cell phone to record what's happening in public, including with agents of the government. And of course, in the case of Mr. Preddy, it's also an assault on Second Amendment rights as well, because he was exercising his right to bear arms within the confines of state and local law. He never drew a weapon. He never brandished a weapon. And the weapon was taken from him. And then even after it was taken from him, he was fatally shot, apparently around 9 or 10 times by the officials. And that's what's causing such a scandal and such outrage across the country, because it's really a violation of every right contained in the Bill of Rights. I mean, it's an absolute violation of the right to life, liberty, and property against false deprivation without due process by the government. And that's exactly what it was. And so the rights of the people are being trampled, and it is causing a major revulsion and a major reaction, as you're pointing out, and a spreading nationwide movement totally across party lines and geographic lines in the country.
And the new videos that have emerged yesterday and today clearly show that the agents, as they're firing their guns, are literally walking backwards. They are calmly actually walking backwards from what is by then a body that's now getting hit with the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th bullet or more. And there's absolutely no threat whatsoever. He may have been killed by the very first bullet fired. But they're literally just walking backwards, creating more and more safe space between them and the person they continue to fire at.
I mean, it's utterly cowardly. And I think we saw cowardly actions by these ICE officials in both of these cases. And in both, you can see officers running away from the scene of the crime, almost as if they're concerned to not be associated with it as quickly as possible. They're certainly more concerned about their own complicity and knowledge of their complicity than they are in doing anything to help the victims of the killing. But the idea that it would take 4 or 5 or 6 real law enforcement officers to subdue one suspect is just absurd and ridiculous. And law enforcement across the country is in an uproar about that. But then the idea that after he's subdued and after they have taken his weapon from him, that they go ahead and shoot him makes it a cold-blooded killing.
You have communicated with the Attorney General about what you need to know about this investigation, and she knows you're on your way to being chairman of this committee a year from now, sooner than a year from now. She's going to have to answer this eventually. I just want to read some of what you're demanding from her, the issues you want to explore. Your message to her today said, despite the court order, local officials are reportedly still being shut out of the investigation as federal officials refuse to disclose basic information, such as the identity of the federal agents who shot Mr. Preddy. The Department of Justice cover-up of these killings did not occur spontaneously or in isolation. Someone affirmatively ordered FBI agents to drop the civil rights investigation into Agent Ross. Someone affirmatively ordered federal law enforcement to instead investigate Ms. Good's widow. Someone affirmatively ordered line agents to block state prosecutors from accessing key evidence. Someone is now taking the same actions with regard to the killing of another American citizen. And that's the kind of thing that, as chairman of the committee, you will be able to get real answers to that, if not sooner.
We want to know exactly who gave those orders. We want to know who's responsible, and we want to hold them accountable. And as you're saying, that's the difference between having the gavel or not having the gavel, having the subpoena power or not having the subpoena power. But when we get it, we will make sure that there will be accountability for the killers of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. We are going to nail that down. The Department of Justice was created in the wake of the Civil War to try to enforce civil rights and justice for the freed slave population and to try to create some semblance of equality of rights under the law. Well, this Department of Justice has shown no interest in actually investigating who's responsible for these cold-blooded killings of U.S. citizens in the streets of the heartland of America. And they've moved to cover up the possibility of our finding out what is in the evidence, and they've moved to blockade investigations by real law enforcement officials in Minnesota and in Minneapolis. And I'm glad that Attorney General Keith Ellison in Minnesota and the governor of Minnesota Walz are pushing and demanding in court that the evidence not be destroyed or removed, and that it be turned over to state and local authorities.
We've had the local prosecutor, the county attorney, Mary Moriarty, on this program, and she says she has opened a homicide investigation in both of these cases, and she is going to proceed with whatever evidence she can get. It seems likely that the agents involved in these have left the state of Minnesota. It seems likely that the Trump administration would simply move them out of the jurisdiction by now.
Yeah, well, criminal suspects, of course, can leave the jurisdiction. That doesn't absolve them of the crime. Stephen Miller wants the people operating under his vicious, lawless instructions to believe that they have absolute immunity. They do not. They have qualified immunity, speaking legally, which means they have to be operating within the bounds of law, under the scope of their employment, and they've got to be acting reasonably. And if they step outside of that by acting unreasonably and outside of the law, then they lose that protection. Now, admittedly, the Trump Department of Justice and the Roberts Court have been doing everything in their power to try to undermine that, but it is still the law that they are not covered by absolute immunity. And one of the things that we need to do, again, operating as much as possible in a bipartisan way, is to get all Americans together to say that the rights contained in the Bill of Rights need to be fortified now by legislation. For example, everybody's got the right to be filming law enforcement in public. That's just part of the First Amendment. Everybody has a right before their door is knocked down by a government agent to have a search warrant issued based on probable cause by a neutral, independent magistrate that is in the judicial branch of government, not by the executive branch that is trying to knock your door down. It's not their warrant that's needed. It's a warrant from a neutral, impartial magistrate that can take their petition. These are the basic precepts of the Bill of Rights. They're being trampled by the Trump administration on a daily basis. And again, I just want to thank the people of Minnesota, as you've been doing, Lawrence, for standing up every day and showing the rest of America what we need to do. We need to stand up every day against this reign of terror and lawlessness by the Trump administration and fight back at every turn. And we are going to get through it, and we are winning every day, and our forces are growing all over the country.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
And coming up today, Donald Trump proved once again that he actually doesn't know what the word affordability means. You can watch him wrestle with that word.
He broke down in court, not a little emotional, not teary-eyed, completely broke down, sobbing, shaking, head in his hands. And this is a guy who has spent years, decades really, projecting this image of being untouchable, unbreakable, above it all. But when that judge started reading guilty on all counts, when the jury foreman stood up and said guilty over and over and over again, something inside him just shattered. And we're not talking about some minor case with a few charges where maybe he could claim partial victory or say, well, at least they didn't get me on everything. We're talking about guilty on every single count, every single one. And the breakdown was so complete, so visceral, that even the people who wanted to see him held accountable were shocked by how thoroughly he collapsed in that moment. Because this wasn't just a legal defeat. This was the destruction of everything he'd built his entire identity around. And what happened in that courtroom, the minute-by-minute reality of how it all fell apart, it's something you need to understand because it shows what happens when someone who thought they were above the law finally gets held accountable. So let's talk about what actually happened in that courtroom, because the details matter, and they paint a picture of just how complete this collapse was. The jury had been deliberating for days. This wasn't a quick verdict. This wasn't a situation where they walked in and immediately said guilty. They took their time. They went through the evidence. They discussed it. They made sure. And when they finally sent the note to the judge saying, "We've reached a verdict," everyone knew something big was about to happen. But nobody, and I mean nobody, expected what actually went down. The defendant gets brought back into the courtroom. His lawyers are there, the prosecutors are there, the judge is there, and the jury files in. And there's this moment, this ritual that happens in every criminal trial, where the judge asks if they've reached a verdict, and the foreman says yes, and then they hand over the verdict form. And in those few seconds where the judge is reading the verdict silently before it gets read aloud, you can feel the tension in the room, because everyone knows it's coming, but nobody knows which way it's going to go. Except this time, something was different. This time, as soon as the clerk started to read the first count, you could see him start to fall apart. His hands started shaking. And I'm not talking about a little nervous tremor. I'm talking about visible shaking that people across the courtroom could see. And he looked down at the table in front of him, just stared at it. Like if he didn't look up, maybe it wouldn't be real. And then the clerk reads count 1, guilty. And the room is dead silent. The judge had warned everyone before the verdict that any outbursts, any reactions, and you're getting removed from the courtroom. So everyone is just sitting there in complete silence. But you can feel it. You can feel the weight of that word, guilty. And then count 2, guilty. And his head drops lower. Count 3, guilty. Count 4, guilty. And by count 7, his shoulders are shaking. You can see it. He's trying to hold it together, but he can't. His lead attorney notices and puts a hand on his arm, trying to steady him, trying to keep him composed, but it's not working. Count 12, guilty. And now there are tears, actual tears running down his face, in open court, in front of everyone. The prosecutors, the judge, the jury, the press, everyone can see him crying. And the clerk just keeps reading. Count 15, guilty. Count 18, guilty. Count 20, guilty. And by this point, he has his head in his hands. He's not even trying to maintain composure anymore. He's just completely broken down. And the clerk keeps going because there are 34 counts total, and every single one of them has to be read. Count 25, guilty. Count 30, guilty. And finally, count 34, the last one, guilty. The clerk finishes, sets down the verdict form, and the judge asks the foreman to confirm, "Is this your verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor." And then the judge does something that almost never happens in cases like this. The judge polls the jury, asks each juror individually, "Juror number 1, is this your verdict?" "Yes." "Juror number 2, is this your verdict?" "Yes." All 12 of them, one by one, yes, 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 12 times, confirming that every single one of them agreed, guilty on all counts. And with each yes, you could see him sinking lower. Because this wasn't just a verdict, this was 12 random citizens, people who had no agenda, no political motivation, no reason to lie, all agreeing that he was guilty, that the evidence proved it, that there was no reasonable doubt. And when the last juror said yes, when that 12th confirmation came through, it was over. There was no appealing to the jury. There was no claiming they got it wrong. There was no narrative he could spin to make this go away. It was just reality. Cold, undeniable reality. And then the judge thanks the jury and excuses them. They file out. And the judge turns to him, asks him to stand, and he can barely do it. He's still crying, still shaking, but he stands up. And the judge sets a sentencing date and remands him to custody until sentencing, which means he's not going home. He's going to jail right now. And federal marshals come over to the defense table. And for the first time in this entire process, for the first time since this whole thing started, he doesn't argue. He doesn't object. He doesn't claim it's unfair or rigged or a witch hunt. He just stands there while they put the handcuffs on him and they lead him out of the courtroom. And that image, that moment of him being led out in handcuffs, sobbing, completely defeated, that's the moment when everything changed. Because for years he'd been saying this day would never come, that he'd never be held accountable, that the system couldn't touch him. And in one morning, in one verdict, all of that fell apart. Every bit of it. The invincibility, the defiance, the confidence, all of it gone, replaced by tears and handcuffs, and the reality that he's going to prison. Now, here's what makes this verdict so devastating beyond just the emotional breakdown. This wasn't a split verdict. This wasn't a situation where the jury found him guilty on some counts and not guilty on others. That happens all the time in complex cases. The prosecution proves some charges, but not all of them. The defense can claim partial victory. They can say, well, we beat them on the important ones. They can spin it. But you can't spin guilty on all counts. You can't claim victory when the jury looked at 34 separate charges and said guilty 34 times. That's a complete rejection. That's the jury saying, we heard your defense, we considered your arguments, we looked at your evidence, and we don't believe you. We believe the other side. Every witness they brought, we found credible. Every document they showed us, we found convincing. Every argument they made, we accepted. And every argument you made, we rejected. That's what guilty on all counts means. It means the defense lost completely. Not partially, not mostly, completely. And the jury didn't rush to this verdict either. They deliberated for days. They took their time. They discussed it, which means this wasn't an emotional decision. This wasn't a jury that was biased or prejudiced or rushing to judgment. This was a jury that carefully considered all the evidence and came to a unanimous conclusion. And that unanimous conclusion was guilty on everything, every single charge. Which brings us to the question nobody wants to ask, but everyone's thinking. What happens now that the verdict is in and he completely broke down in court?